Good afternoon and welcome to one of these events of the Geneva Peace Week. My name is Nasir Andisha. I am the permanent representative of Afghanistan here in Geneva. I'm just filling for some of the colleagues who just had excuses and problems and fall ill. We have had Dr. Amina Khan, who is the director of the Center for Afghanistan and the Middle East in Islamabad, their colleague working closely on the regional diplomacy around Afghanistan. And also we had another colleague from Vienna who just arrived from New York and could not join us. So I have to take impromptu responsibility of being the moderator here, filling this void. Most of you probably know me. I've been here in Geneva for now almost 5 years. So I think one more year I will be the Sheikh of Safara, the Dean of the Ambassadors, because when you stay longer than 5 years, you're the Dean. But all you know our circumstances, and we are here not as an ordinary embassy, but also as an extraordinary embassy, which is basically focusing on the human rights and women rights of our people since 2021. And Geneva Peace Week, Human Rights Council, GA in New York has always been venues where we can raise the voices of our people, particularly women and girls, in the Human Rights Council. But Geneva Peace Week has always been a venue for us to discuss matters related to peace, security. We started with women, peace, and security, Madam Koofi, if you remember, and I think it was 2024. 2023, we discussed women, peace, and security with yourself at the OACE. And last year, we discussed constitutionalism in Afghanistan and how the role of constitution and peace building. And this year, we have a very distinguished panels, which I'll quickly introduce also. And we were discussing this whole idea of the peace building, because we are in Geneva Peace Week. We are, in a center which was actually established for making peace between East and West at the time. It was the center which was built when Reagan and Gorbachev agreed on this, the next phase of their relationships and after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I think it's the best place to discuss peace in Afghanistan. So this discussion is mostly revolving because you see that the situation in Afghanistan is becoming more and more in crisis. It's a kind of fragile peace which Taliban thought that they brought is now coming to an end. We have, for the first time, unfortunately, the neighboring countries directly attacking our capital. And it was foreseen. We always say that, it will be a repeating history of Vietnam and Cambodia, where, the Cambodian Khmer Rouge was brought in by the Vietnamese, but then they have to remove them because what they did to their own people. So with this quick introduction, I would like to, the topic of today is convergence and divergence of international and regional peace efforts. What is happening in Afghanistan right now? Do we still have an opportunity to save Afghanistan from entering into a very hot geopolitical game, with India inviting, a human rights abuser, so-called foreign minister of Taliban, into their country and putting a red carpet for them? But on the other hand, Pakistan is doing what it does. I think, will Afghanistan fall again into something like that? So we have Professor Michael Semple here. Michael Semple was the Deputy Chief of Mission of EU in Kabul, who, as we were joking, the original sin of talking to Taliban started there with his efforts. But of course, it was a different thing. He has been a long-term expert of Afghanistan, friend of people of Afghanistan, have been involved with all of these peace efforts, particularly with the non-Taliban, with opposition forces. He's at the Queen University of Belfast right now. Next to me is Dr. Mostafa Mastoor, who was the Minister of Economy of Afghanistan. He was Deputy Minister of Finance for a long time, but also he was the chief, advisor of the Peace Council of Afghanistan. I think his last job was there in the Peace Council. He might be telling you more about what happened within the Peace Council in Afghanistan. In my right is Madam Fawzia Koofi. I'm sure she's a very familiar face here in Geneva because she's always been advocating for women's rights and human rights in Afghanistan, but not on that. She's very active on the political scene in Afghanistan. She was the first Eva, Deputy Speaker of Afghanistan's parliament, as a young, very young member of parliament at the time. She's still young, but was very young at the time. And she is also running Women for Afghanistan, an organization here which spearheaded a very important, crucial, controversial conference in Islamabad, which also, pushed the politics of Afghanistan and the opposition politics into a new height. And last but not least is Mr. Ambassador Mirwais, who was our ambassador to Turkmenistan, but his last job was Deputy Foreign Minister for Political Affairs, had been engaged and involved with the region, particularly as work in China and Russia. I think he's one of our diplomats who speaks both Chinese and Russian languages, besides Farsi and English. And he has also been very much involved in the negotiation with, strategic partnership with the United States, but also, a fairly strategic partnership with Iran. So he will tell us about the regional affairs. So without further ado, we will start, the theme is that, what happened to the peace process in Afghanistan? The differences between the regional players who wanted something else and the international players who started the peace process in Doha and culminated to a disaster which we are facing right now. So what were the convergence and divergences? Is there a space right now that the international and regional can come together and we will prevent Afghanistan from falling into another abyss? So I will start with my right hand, Madam Koofi, and then we will go.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and I also would like to welcome everyone to this discussion. I know that during Peace Week is like the same like UN General Assembly or Committee on the States of Women. Very crowded, very busy. People need to be in different places, but I'm glad that there are many people, including some students that I know you're studying, peace building, humanitarian, international development and international relations. Probably this is the most relevant topic for you. I would like to start by an international instrument which is supposed to protect and ensure participation, protection of women into the very crucial and yet very sensitive process of peace and security, and that is the Security Council Resolution 1325. You know that this year is the 25th anniversary of Security Council Resolution. And for us to assess that and the impact of that in our parts of the world, in conflict and in conflict and post-conflict countries. If you look at the inclusion of women in as a result of the Security Council resolution, of course there are some positive impacts. 100 countries developed their national action plan on women, peace and security. Women inclusion in the peace process have increased. Based on the UN Women, then it was called UNIFEM report in 2010, there were 6% increase or 6% inclusion of women in official peace processes. However, in 2022, that number increased to 14%, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. The inclusion of women increased in the peace processes into 14%. It's nowhere close to balance. Because if you compare the inclusion and representation of women to the fact that women are victims of any war, the comparison, the participation is very low. Because in any conflict, not that women only lose their lives, their loved ones, opportunities for education, work, access to resources is taken away from them, but women's bodies are being used as a weapon of war, more and more. Conflict-related sexual violence is now a common phenomenon in the conflict-affected countries. In the case of Afghanistan, this is very relevant and very true, because not only that women have been killed, their loved ones have been killed, but their rights are weaponized. Their rights are weaponized as a weapon of power, as a weapon of as a weapon of continuation of the ideology. So that's why the women, peace and security agenda is more relevant in our countries. But I think globally, this agenda has failed women all over. That's why when the peace process started in Afghanistan between the Republic government then and the Taliban, we pushed for women inclusion. And it was the first time that we were able to include 4 women in the peace negotiation. It was historic, because I think it's a common, again, phenomenon that, peace is regarded as war is a man-produced product. Peace is usually regarded as something that men could resolve it. And I'm glad that, there is a peace now in the Middle East, at least between Gaza and Israel. But if you look at the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit, all main, except one or two maybe, standing together. So it is not only our part of the world problem, I think it's a global North problem. All the peace delegates that travel to Afghanistan now and before, 90% of them are men. So I think it's a problem that you guys need to also fight in your own countries. We're fighting it. So that's why we actually were able to include 4 women in the peace negotiation during the Doha talks. I was one of them. We did not succeed the way we wanted. If you want to know more about it, there is a documentary made about it. It's called In the Sharp Edges of Peace. I think there will be a screening on the 30th of October, if I don't mistake. Dr. Sepp, my friend and colleague and partner in crime and partner in Women for Afghanistan is here. She will probably will know more about the details of this film screening. It shows about our struggles of how do we ensure women are there. But that failed. Now, where are we? 4 years post-Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, I don't need to tell you where are the figures. The figures from 35% women inclusion in civil servant to 0% now women in civil servant, 25% women in parliamentarians, 0% women in politics, 11 million children to school, 40% girls now to almost 0% women in school and universities beyond grade 6. The figures go on and on and on. I don't need to tell you because you hear all of that. But what the world does is only talk about human rights, which is crucial. And I'm very grateful for those countries who sponsored our latest resolution on, investigative mechanism and other investigative mechanism, including the ICG and ICC. We need to ensure these multilateral organizations function. However, there should be also a political lens to the situation. That's what we are doing. We want to empower women into leadership, give them the political leadership, give them the space, because women need to talk about what they want for their country. And what's interesting for you to know, most of these global North leaders think, well, if women are engaged, it should be only about human rights and not core, hardcore political issues. But we gathered 140 Afghan women last year in Tirana to prioritize their priority. As a result, they all advised us and they said, you need to engage with male allies because they're the ones who actually should understand the importance of women participation. I'm very grateful that now most of these men that you see here are our allies and they participated in our event. This event continue. It's a dialogue that we want to engage with regional countries are very, very important for change in Afghanistan. But I think, moving forward, we need to prepare ourselves for a post-Taliban situation. And a post-Taliban where women are not just, tokenistic for decoration, but they play a crucial role in shaping a narrative for their country that is, as a result of that, there is a government based on the will of people, for the people, by the people. These might look very, typical words that I raise here, but we mean it. While democracy is being in danger in the epicenter of democracy in Europe or US, we still believe that democracy is the solution moving forward for everybody to be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Madam Koofi, that was nice ending with which we'll still stay in Afghanistan. I know it was the discussion mostly around women and UN, I think 1325, which is again, Geneva is a center, a base for it to be implemented. I'll move to my left to Dr. Mastoor because first we'll cover the domestic issues and then we'll go to international and regional. Dr. Mastoor, if you we have 5 minutes. I know we have long notes, but if you can tell us about the the nitty-gritties of the peace process and why and how it failed and how we should look to future.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Andisha. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here and talking on the topic which is about convergence, divergence, post-Doha, but peace building. But at least it is necessary to talk a little bit about Doha itself as well, because where we are now and why we are at this stage.
By Doha, he means the Doha peace process in Afghanistan, not the capital.
Oh, yeah. No, because it is there.
Yes. Okay.
So, at least on that one, the divergence started at a time that some regional countries, they wanted a difficult withdrawal of US and NATO. So they were pushing towards that direction. And then recent NATO, when they were disappointed a little bit about internal problems inside Afghanistan, they started talking directly with Taliban. So all what we have now, it's linked to that part. And also what just before the collapse, even the Taliban, though they signed the agreement with the US, they were still thinking that there will be some sort of solution. But the way it was moving fast, collapse of province after province, even the Taliban thought, oh, there must be something that we don't know, let's try. So the option A was not what we are now, but maybe the option A was slightly different. But anyway, all what is important is what from now on. At least, unfortunately, what we can say today marks 1,523rd day from the time Taliban took over power. And it was incredibly difficult time, especially for those still inside, and particularly for women and girls. In this period also, different approaches, different forums, different processes started. Okay, we fought enough with each other. What we should do now, can we start talking to each other? The culture of dialogue in Afghanistan for the past 48 years of consecutive conflict is already non-existent. This was why a number of processes, at least we have here Ambassador Andisha, who's leading the CDP-G process. We have Madam Koofi that is leading the Women for Afghanistan process. We have AFTF, and, a founding member of the Forum for National Dialogue. We have Vienna and others. Everybody's trying to bring all the groups together around the table and keep them around the table to talk. But unfortunately, the interaction so far was not that much helpful. Particularly, it goes again to the international community that in the past 1,520 days, the excuse they were giving that, oh, our plate is full. So Afghanistan is not top priority for us. So partly we can link it with that full plate, but if that plate is still kept full for a little bit more, then it will be too late for this. As I mentioned, there's almost 1,500 days that the schools are closed for girls. And on the other hand, only last year, Taliban hired 100,000 new teachers for jihadi madrasas. 100,000. They paid in their budget $500 million, which is 35 million Afghani, to hire only in 1 year 100,000 jihadi madrasas. Do we need that much madrasas? There were already a number of them there, Taliban included. And then if they want this to be continued, how long more? If everyone train 50 or brainwash 50 young kids in a year, then multiplied by the number of teachers, multiplied by the number of the years that they will be there. In any way, all these processes that now going on everywhere, at least that I'm talking about Forum for National Dialogue. We had 2 meetings so far, one last November and another last February in Istanbul. The upcoming one will be in December, again in Istanbul. We're thankful to EU and to the UK government and the government of Turkey for hosting this. And in that process, we invite people from all corners of the globe, all Afghans from Afghanistan and everywhere else that they are, to come and discuss their differences on the table. We invited Taliban as well. Unfortunately, in the last 2 meetings, they didn't come. We still invite them because they are in Kabul now. We don't know whether they will come again or not, because we have to put an end, but also all these processes to work together. Another thing that Forum for National Dialogue has done, that we looked for the papers, plans that other forums have worked on Afghanistan. So far, we gathered 26 different plans, and we combined them. We found similarities, we found differences, and we're working on our next meeting that how we can lay a roadmap based on all these thinkings that are there. And we are thankful to all of you, and we hope that the road for peace building and peacemaking is there, but it will be, it cannot be without all of supports that we are expecting and needed, Afghans and neighbors and international partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mastoor. I will now go back to my right, and I will let Ambassador Nob to tell us about these regional and international dynamics. You know, it's a little bit of background. It's interesting for the peace building, but also for students of strategic studies who are here. But then we will come back to Michael, who can tell us what can we do, you know, how we, the role of international community, particularly Geneva as a platform. And I'm sure we will have time for, a lot of time for question and answers. So,
thank you very much. I also take the opportunity to thank Ambassador Andisha, and also great pleasure to be part of this panel. And thank you all for coming. So I should be very selective on taking into the account the limitation of the time. So I will start from the divergence. Then, of course, we will go to the convergence. Then you will see where we are right now. So on the divergence point, as you all know, Afghanistan was part of rivalry during the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. After the Soviet Union withdrawal and defeat, Afghanistan was abandoned, ignored by international community. It became an epicenter for terrorist groups led by today's Taliban. Then after 9/11, the Afghanistan became a point of convergence, but in fight against terrorism. We had a good understanding between regional and international player. But what happened on 2010 after the killing of Osama bin Laden, when the US, those days administration, Obama administration, decided to leave Afghanistan, the divergence started. Then, of course, the negotiations started. The US unilaterally started to negotiate with the Taliban, led by an Afghan, Zalmay Khalilzad, an Afghan American who had a political ambition in Kabul. Also, he had a political ambition in Washington, which was the biggest, I think, problem for the process those days. What the Doha deal or the Doha process did, the Doha process actually didn't address demand of Afghan people, which was, you know, seeking for peace. It addressed the immediate need and political consideration of US, which was a safe withdrawal and an understanding between Taliban and the United States on counter-terrorism. So that created the biggest divergence, and that created suspicion, specifically the annexes, which we don't know. The annexes, it was on the city, and still, you know, there are both parties still today, they are engaged in implementation of the Doha agreement, whatever we say, but both parties are engaged, and the Taliban are receiving regularly millions of dollars as part of Doha deal. So that created a deep suspicion, not just among Afghans, you know, the people from the Republic, but also in the regional countries. It wiped out all the achievements which we made in the last 20 years, including women participation, including integration in international society. And that showed a clear divergence between the values and democratic governance and the way the power was handed over to the Taliban. So from that time, the regional countries, they were talking somehow by surprise. So they also rushed to make friends with Taliban. The friendship with Taliban became a sort of geopolitical advantage among the regional countries. And that gave the Taliban a big legitimacy. Taliban was received as a sort of government, and the Afghanistan institution, democratic institution, they were ignored all together. The counterterrorism, of course, annex in Doha agreement supposed to address the Afghanistan problem, to not Afghanistan not become the epicenter again for the terrorist groups, but it didn't even take the consideration of that transition between the start of the signing of agreement and also full withdrawal of the U.S. forces. Then it caused the geopolitical question again and become a biggest source of divergence between region and United States, between Afghanistan government and United States as well. If you see, the divergence also get wider when you see the statements of the Taliban. The Taliban statements specifically address and shows their commitment in fighting against ISIS, fighting against Al-Qaeda, which is part of the Doha commitment, but it didn't say anything about the regional terrorist groups, because we have TTP, Tehrik-e-Taliban in Pakistan, we have Tehrik-e-Taliban in Tajikistan, we have Islamic IMU, Uzbekistan Islamic Movement, we have the East Turkestan Islamic, we have dozens of other terrorist groups which were the main threat to the region. So it didn't address the concern of the region. So then the perception came that the Taliban are a force which secures somehow the US strategic interest in the cost of others. And actually Taliban are a geopolitical consideration, which it went from the divergence to the sort of trust. And we see it as a new era, a post sort of counterterrorism, because the counterterrorism has no meaning. When Sirajuddin Haqqani, the head of the counterterrorism, the head of the Haqqani network, he is traveling around, and also, Jolani and others part of they have access to wherever they want. So I think now we are in the different era. We are living in the different era. So this is what I think my calling from you, from the students, from the people who share the same value as we did. You share the participation of women, and also I think we ask you and we want you to say no if there is a geopolitical consideration comes from your government to use Islamic extremism for realization of very narrow-minded national interest of a single country. So I just don't want to...
I think we have more time. We can go for another round also. I want you also to discuss, you're saying that how we move from the counterterrorism strategy to geopolitics. So I think this is something maybe we will probably come back to it. If you can conclude maybe in 1 minute.
Yeah. So
then I was told we have till 2:30, which is good.
Yeah. So then what we see, the good example of this new era is the Muttaqi, the Taliban foreign minister, visit to India. He visited to India. He decided to don't let no reporters to his press female reporters. And then, of course, it was fixed, but it shows in the world's largest democracy the weight of geopolitics versus human right, woman right, which India has taught for decades. So now we are entering to the new. What we did, I think, if I take another couple of minutes.
No, 1 minute.
1 minute. Now you see, this stop and start cycle of war between Taliban and Pakistan. You can see the complex relationship of Taliban with all these regional terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda. It shows the nature of the Taliban. So the nature of Taliban is not state building. The nature of Taliban is not to be normalized. The nature of Taliban is not to sort of justify the geopolitical demand of a country as a reality in Afghanistan. The nature is to be used against each other government. We have enough proof that the situation will escalate. It will destabilize. Pakistan is the first step. We have enough evidence that Iranians have the same problem. They have the same complicity with this group. And of course, it will just further, step by step, will spread to the Central Asia, and it will cause hundreds of thousands, maybe migrants to the Western Europe. So what we do, what we ask, let's let's be careful about the geopolitical games, and let's address it on the grassroots.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Nob. So last but not least, we're going to Professor Michael Semple. He will tell us more about the national aspect of it and why, Geneva, why still we should have some hope here. Because then, at least on parts of the human rights, thankfully, we have had, after 4 years of pushing, we had something that Geneva could do on the human rights side. And that's the highest level of achievement, basically, which is the independent investigative mechanism. But Geneva is also a place for peace and peace building. So, Michael.
How many minutes?
5 to 6.5.
6.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Delighted to be with you. If I'm to jump on to what can be done on peace, I will of course set the context, which already relates about what is happening inside Afghanistan today. I think we should start off with the position that Afghanistan is an active conflict, and pursuit of peace is as important today in Afghanistan as it has ever been. From some of the points that my distinguished colleagues made, I think we should also add the word urgency when we think about peace. That pursuing peace in Afghanistan is not just important, it is also urgent. Things are happening quickly. Spillover effects from Afghanistan into the region and potentially beyond are already happening and have potential to get worse if it is not addressed. But when people talk about war, there's this sort of famous idea that you can't fight the new war with the tactics which were perfected in the last one. The same applies to peace and peacemaking in Afghanistan. The challenges of peace today in Afghanistan are different from previous eras, and the tactics which either were perfected or in most cases failed in recent rounds of peacemaking in Afghanistan are now fundamentally irrelevant. The what has to be done list today on peace is different from what one would have come up with if one had a discussion when, for example, when Mastoor and Fawzia were involved in the initial Doha negotiations. In Afghanistan, when I say it is an armed conflict, it is also something much more than that. It's amazing to me that it is not one of the hottest topics on the planet, because it is the only country where a violent jihadi movement, which remains fundamentally and explicitly and in an organized way committed to the pursuit of violent jihad, not within its frontiers, but beyond its frontiers, has captured a state and a national territory and is putting all of the resources of the state. And one example is the example that Mastoor Saab rightly gave around the expanding the jihadi madrasas. All the resources of the state are put at the disposal of this project, advancing the violent jihad. Of course, I know we're meant to be concerned about, so obviously, we should be concerned about global climate change. We should, and the competition at the strategic level between the key powers. Yes, of course, this is the era we're in rather than the old era, the out-of-date era of counterterrorism. But Afghanistan now has the potential to be a factor destabilizing international security in ways which are profoundly different from what happened last time round in the run-up to September 11th, perhaps all the more profound. The list of events which are happening underway, of course, now at the top of them is probably the clashes between the Taliban and Pakistan. Of course, that was foreseen, and it's only the start of it, and it's not accidental because, again, you have a violent jihadi movement explicitly committed to pursuing its violent jihad, and that includes the overthrowing of the constitutional order in Pakistan and the replacement of that order by an emirate on the model of Afghanistan. That is an explicit strategic commitment pursued by the leaders of the Taliban, and using their army, their Ministry of Defense, the old weapons they got from the Americans, all available resources are pursuing that end. And don't worry, Central Asia, your turn will come next. So to jump ahead to the issues around peacemaking, since ultimately the failure of the Doha negotiations, which they were, at least we were new, everybody was told they were to deliver peace in Afghanistan. They did not deliver peace in Afghanistan. They facilitated the capture of the state by the Taliban movement. That was never written on the box, although many of us, of course, warned the Americans, this is what you're setting yourselves up for. That failed. Afterwards, the Americans very cutely encouraged a consensus for the UN to lead a process of engagement with the Taliban. The US could back out. They have pursued engagement in different ways over the past 4 years, essentially pursuing the idea of compromise with the Taliban, where the Taliban will become better behaved, allow some ill-defined, some inclusive governance, perhaps open doors of schools to girls. They've pursued that compromise. Not only have they not achieved that, it is impossible for them to achieve that in negotiation with the representatives of the Islamic Emirate, because the leadership is strategically committed to different outcomes. Therefore, when I say that the urgent requirements of peace now require a different approach, what is required is an approach which helps Afghans prepare for the eventual collapse of the Islamic Emirate, because it will collapse. Most Afghans have concluded, including many inside the Taliban movement, that it is unsustainable, and ways in which it is possible to prepare Afghans for the resumption of a functioning pluralism in the country. For that, you don't need engagement with the representatives of the Islamic Emirate. You need engagement with essentially the peers of the people who you sit here, who represent what I broadly characterize as the national democratic forces in Afghanistan, who will be called upon to put Afghanistan back together again. You can come with, there's a shopping list of things which are needed to enable them to do their job of preparing for the return of pluralism in Afghanistan. Also, incumbent upon members of the international community to confer legitimacy on the struggle of the Afghan people to achieve that, because it will be that struggle which achieves it, not military intervention, in the same way as the struggle of the ANC was legitimized during the long years of the struggle against apartheid. And it's important that the Taliban, while of course for everyday matters, states may be obliged to engage with them, but they must not be given any veto in the peace process.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that was a very good point to open up. We can open up for some questions and answers. We have sufficient time. I think, this is probably one of the achievements probably you can get any time that we have a lot of time for question and answers, but we also will go for another round. So one question right there, another here, two. We'll start with that. Gentlemen. And also, if you can introduce yourself. There is a mic here, so we can hear you.
I'm a journalist and a geopolitical analyst. I have a question between the relation between Afghanistan and Pakistan. I would like to know if there is a role in the falling of Imran Khan, coup d'etat against Imran Khan with American interest in this operation of coup d'etat. Is there consequences and the actual situation between Afghanistan and Pakistan? If Imran Khan was always present, is the situation now will be the same?
Even worse, probably. Next question.
In sense of
Hello,
It was called Taliban Khan, unfortunately.
hello, thank you very much. I think it was very comprehensive. And, I'm Katie. I study Geneva Academy, Transitional Justice and Human Rights. Originally, I come from Georgia. My question is related to international cooperation and support. Of course, I think in this case, I'm not an expert on Afghan matters, but I think diaspora can be an important force to even top up this topic, and as well as civil society or any kind of democratic and national forces. And considering a lot of examples when international community, I guess, failed when dealing with Afghan topics. What is the trust? Like, do Afghan diaspora or the civil society trust the international community, or what is your feelings about future collaborations and cooperations? Exactly based, for example, the last speaker's critiques that some topics are not treated properly or adequately. Thank you very much.
More questions? Okay, we can take three and then.
Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Grace, and I work at the Nuclear Threat Initiative in Washington. And one question I have is, you mentioned the spillover effects of the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan, especially on their neighbors. And with Pakistan being a nuclear-armed neighbor, what do you think the implications of these spillover effects could be on both the global nuclear order, but also nuclear material security in the region?
It's a very tough question. So I think we can start with the last question yourself, and then we'll go to Hashem's. I think anyone wanted to address that, and then Michael, you can talk about the nuclear.
Yeah, indeed, I will.
Please.
On our engagement with international community, after especially, what we call is the betrayal to the global moral values of international principles, we divide the engagement in two parts. One is engaging with multilateral organizations, such as the Human Rights Council, the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, the UN as a body, with all the pulses about engaging with these organizations and the little impact we see on the ground in our parts of the world, we still believe that these organizations should be uplifted, empowered, supported, and engaged with. And that's why we have been engaging with Human Rights Council. We have a specific agenda there. It's called the Interactive Dialogue on the Situation of Afghan Women and Girls. The women, along with our mission, were able to include that agenda in 2022. Since then, there is a special rapporteur who submit his reports periodically to the Human Rights Council. There is a case on the violation of CEDA before ICJ. The case has not gone to ICJ, but 4 countries have demonstrated intention to take the case to ICJ. And also there is ICC case on Afghanistan, which is, recently in June, they have issued arrest warrant on for 2 Taliban leaders. And also recently, there is a, Human Rights Council decision on accountability, on investigative mechanism for human rights violation in Afghanistan. In the meantime, there is also a global campaign on gender apartheid, to codify gender apartheid in the Rome Statutes and also international mechanisms. So these are the processes we still use, because what do we do in their absence? What do we do if these mechanisms are not there to protect the voiceless? I understand there is a lot of points of view, and in fact, some of these institutions are being banned by the US, but we still use them, and we engage with them. The least impact some of these decision makers to bring division among the Taliban leaders. So sometimes we think, well, these decisions are so far away from reality. They might be, but actually they make an impact on our particular situation. When the arrest warrant was issued about the 2 Taliban leaders, which I hope more will come, I hope EU and I hope other parts of other countries will include the Minister of Education, Minister of Higher Education, because these edicts actually come from them. The Vice and Virtue Minister, because he said at some point that the woman actually, their voice is regarded as virtue. They shouldn't speak in public. So basically, and it is every woman's fight to stand on this. So we hope more people will be included. This created a division among the Taliban, fragmentation among the Taliban, which gives a political leverage for possible political process. In the meantime, the question about the country's engagement. I'm being often asked this question, like the same countries, the same people, the same group that actually betrayed you, why do you trust to engage with them? Right? And I think Afghanistan is probably one of the failed policies for many global North countries, and especially I would say Europe. Since then, I had expected that Europe will learn its lesson and at least adopt a policy of its own neutral, independent policy based on security. But I can see that until recently, the EU was closely following, and I think still is following US politics. So I think EU is a continent where there is a great amount of hope still, connected to protecting democracy and democratic values. In our engagement, we still continue to engage. For us, the region is the most important because we believe that any possible change will only be, empowered and supported by the region. But you're right. How do you trust a group that actually handed over the return of Taliban? It's a difficult question, but as peace builders, we actually have to deal with those difficult circumstances.
Yeah, just to talk to Kathy's question related to international cooperation, on top of what Madam Koofi just mentioned, there are good sides as well, but something that also which people don't feel comfortable with. Just recently, UNAMA, United Nations Mission for Afghanistan, they started a process work, a plan called Mosaic Plan. And that Mosaic Plan is just between UNAMA and Taliban. So when you were talking about the role of the diaspora and role of other non-Taliban actors, it is zero in that
in the
Mosaic
UN
Plan, in the UN paper. Three requests from Taliban, very smart of them, very specific, measurable, realistic, and achievable. And what are they? They want political recognition. So everybody can understand, so far only Russia has recognized them. So it is clear, everybody knows that if it is recognized or not. Secondly, travel ban should be stopped. There is a travel ban on the major figures. So that one, everybody can understand. Just recently, Mutaki went to India. The first part of the news was that that allowance was given to him. The third request of Taliban is that the central bank reserves that now is kept here in Switzerland, that to be released. So very, very clear three requests or demands from Taliban. But on the other side, the UNAMA's demand, or I don't know if it is international community's demand, because at least I know that EU is not happy about that one. That is very vague, very general. Taliban says that they already achieved them. You can't verify. What are they? Human rights. And we are screaming, saying that why you don't make it specific? Just put it girls' education. And the next step, then you can go to the other parts of the human rights. So Taliban already says that they follow the human rights according to the Islamic rules, which we and all other Muslim countries, they say no. Secondly, counterterrorism is another demand from international community. And it is in a time that more than 25 different terrorist groups are active inside Afghanistan. And the third request of international community is inclusive governance, not government. So, and in this one, no any other Afghan asked for their views or to be called for the discussion. And this is only between Taliban and the UNAMA. And here you, when you were talking about the cooperation with the international community, it's a big question to ask. Why? Why that mosaic, which is all in favor of Taliban? And it is the continuation of the lose-lose game of the last 4 years that the international community, given their spares money to Afghanistan for essential services for humanitarian and for development, but in return, they don't receive anything, including our neighbors. Now, Pakistan is fighting because they say that TTP is inside Afghanistan. So that was just one case.
Thank you very much. So we will address her question, but also if you can touch Hashem's, like,
Yes.
the Imran Khan
Yeah.
situation, and we can come back to Mr. Noam about geopolitical.
I mean, Hashim, you asked him whether whether we can speculate if it would have made any difference to what's happened between Pakistan and Afghanistan if Imran Khan had remained in power rather than being pushed out and jailed. Obviously, speculation is difficult, but I would observe that in the hybrid system of government in Pakistan, it is generally understood that the military establishment takes the lead in setting foreign policy and security policy, in particular as regards Afghanistan. I think that we saw that even in the run-up to the Doha process and the exit of the US from Afghanistan, that the policy and all actual stances of Pakistan were being dictated by the army, and probably they would not have been different if Imran had been there. Rhetoric would have been different. They would have done, would have some slightly different diplomacy, but the key decisions probably would have been taken just as were. And so I think we can also anticipate that the Taliban would have ended up hostile even if Imran had managed to stay on. The Taliban, in terms of picking their enemies, they actually regard the Pakistani state to be an illegitimate post-colonial state, sitting on top of an order which they say is un-Islamic because it is a legacy of British colonialism, and they see the Pakistan army as, in a sense, that this is the main incarnation of that. A force which is also part of a legacy of British colonialism, and it's the same army that destroyed the caliphate after the First World War. They have this kind of narrative. So I don't think Imran Khan would have been able to save Taliban-Pakistan relations if he'd been at free. Grace, thank you very much for asking the question. Now, so the most obvious and clearly important answer to your question is that given that we have this violent jihadi movement in control of a state, strategically committed to overthrowing the Pakistani state, at global level, if you were doing scenario planning of the most plausible scenario in which either nuclear materials or a whole arsenal were to come into the hands of essentially an anti-status quo violent movement, a movement which is deliberately trying to subvert the international order, then obviously the Islamic Emirate and Pakistan, that is the top of your list globally. There's another added complication which has received remarkably little attention, although I gather I think the Americans are they've got at least one eye's half open. Which is going back to Doc Saab's mention about state resources being put into their project, the project of advancing the reach of this violent jihadi movement through shaping minds. Literally, they say we want the new generation to think like Taliban, all of them, all the males. They have also shifted state resources into the Afghan Nuclear Institute, which I think at a time when these friends were in government was a little sort of backwater. I mean, it wasn't, it was there, not much was happening. The Taliban, bizarrely, have prioritized the building up of the Afghan Nuclear Institute. They have allocated the Taliban intelligence service to providing full security cover. So most operational matters of it are actually run through the Taliban intelligence service, including site security. They are trying to gather the best available scientific resources in the country, which of course are fairly limited, but they are prioritizing bringing them onto the umbrella of the Nuclear Institute. They are prioritizing developing new facilities, starting off with a campus in central Kabul, but now trying to relocate facilities to secure underground facilities just outside the capital. They're developing a technical relationship with the Islamic Republic of Iran and with Russia. And there is no published account of what the purpose of this new investment is. All we see is that they prioritize it for resource allocation. Everything is being done in secret, and there's some cooperation with Iran and Russia. I would have thought if your group has got to prioritize some research, answering the question, what on earth are they up to, would be a very interesting one. Of course, I'm not saying that they have acquired nuclear material. We know that under the First Emirate, Al-Qaeda was committed to acquiring nuclear material, and at that stage, in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union, they had a good chance of doing so, and they were actively pursuing that. They were overthrown before they could do that. Something similar may be happening just now. It is cloaked in secrecy, but yes, look, the case for what I said about preparing for after the Taliban does not rest on this. So I'm not trying to market the idea. I'm not saying, please, help my friends in the opposition, because otherwise there'll be nuclear accidents. No, that has to happen anyway. But this is, in non-proliferation terms, this now is one of the most important dossiers in the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nob, and then we'll go for another round. We still have time.
I think I will also just echo what Michael Semple said regarding the safety of nuclear. I think there is a open source information on what the Taliban are trying to put together, the capacities, the knowledge of nuclear. What they are planning, we don't know. So what is the most important thing is, I think one thing is what we see from Geneva, from the Western countries, but the important thing is what others see. The 15th of August 2001 and the signing of the Doha Agreement in our region, from Gaza, I don't know, to Pakistan, to the mountain of Andisha in Central Asia, to what they see for first time the collective defeat of West by a terrorist group. They don't go through this geopolitical complicity which we see. A. B, when you see the operation, how the operation is going right now, with the TTP. Ideology is coming from Al-Qaeda and mostly Arab, then supported by Afghan Taliban, facilitated by Afghan Taliban. Engineering comes from Central Asia, whether it's Kazakhstan, whether it's Uzbekistan. Then the IED, the ETIM, the Chinese Muslims, they are master of the IEDs. Then the operation comes from the complex cooperation which they have. You have the last component, which is the PR. PR comes from this homegrown people who are living in West. You see how the Taliban governance was somehow whitewashed by these TikTokers who's going from the West, where they go selectively to show the success of Sharia law against the constitutional order in our region. So what is the message is, I think we have to look at the inspiration which the Taliban success somehow gave to other groups. We witnessed this inspiration from the Gaza to today's Pakistan. So if the possibility of a creation of Emirate of Islamic of Afghanistan is possible with a superpower like United States, so why not the creation of the Emirates in Pakistan is not possible? Why the creation of Emirate? Why the reviving specifically for those students for the strategic studies? Why not the reviving of Emirates of Bukhara in Central Asia? So it is possible. As we see the changes on the ground, so we are just trying to work with our partner to understand the depth and also the deep problem which we are facing as a Islamic extremism with their very backward mentalities. There are voices, I think. There are alternatives, and we can work with those alternatives. We can enable those alternatives, and we can partner with those alternatives. Look at what happened in 2010. 2010, the Taliban was able to get an office in Doha, Qatar. But until now, in 4 years, we are struggling to, find somewhere, and thanks to Ambassador Andisha and other people, also Koofi side, that they give us at least spaces like here to, echo the problem which we face. We are facing a bigger problem, and we need to stand all together to fight back.
Thank you very much. We have 2 questions online. So we'll take these 2 questions, and then if there's questions in the, yes, here, we'll take that too. So number 1 question, I think it will go directly to Mastoor Saab, and that's from Noura Neland, is a colleague of ours, and she is also part of the CDP-G board. Her question is, what should be done about the seizure of foreign reserves that have crashed the economy and the banking system ineffectively and is collectively vanishing and deepen the poverties and further marginalizes women and girls? Because this is, comes from the other side of the spectrum, thinking that, the seizure of the foreign reserves, and it's, it's a legitimate question. And then there's a question by a gentleman called Mansoor Ayubi, and the question is that how far the recognition of Taliban by Russia and newly elevated relation between India and Taliban is relevant to the group and to their future. So that's the 2 questions, and then we'll take this question number 3, and then we'll go.
Thank you. Eliza with the Center on Conflict Development and Peace Building. It's based on some of Michael's comments, but I'd be very interested to hear everybody's thoughts. So Michael mentioned that the tools of peace building that we used previously are not necessarily relevant going forward. But as I understand it, it's also the fabric of power is going to be greatly shifted in the Afghanistan in a future plural Afghanistan, include not just the indoctrination of an entire generation and the systematic removal of women, but also the different roles, the ways that customary authorities have been sidelined, the different roles for mullahs and so on. So you mentioned also a laundry list. I'm curious what should be being done to prepare and by whom?
So if you're going to start from the economy, so remember you were talking about like how the budget was made last year and where are the priorities. So, and also address Noura's question.
Okay, at least the question, that $3.5 billion which shifted here and now is slightly more. According to the Afghanistan law, this is a central bank reserve. It never comes to the Ministry of Finance budget. It is only to support the Afghan currency value. So never, just I think in 90s, maybe 95 till, 91 till 96, it happened, but after that, always the central bank reserves was kept for the central bank. And fortunately or unfortunately, the Afghan currency's value is better now than before Taliban. So that currency still, the value is there. If you compare it with the Iranian currency or even with Pakistani currency, they are going like this, but the Afghani currency even strengthened. So this is what I'm saying, that that fund, even if it is given to Taliban, they will not be used for projects or for operation. It will be only kept to maintain the value of the local currency. But there are so many other questions related to this, even in the morning session we were discussing it, that there are big questions. Even IMF and the World Bank has those questions and they didn't find the answers yet. The imports last year for Afghanistan was something about just above $10 billion. So Afghanistan economy is much smaller. While the export was only $2 billion. So the balance of 8 billion should come from somewhere. Otherwise, that negative balance is where part of it comes from remittance, which all Afghans outside, they're sending money to their families. But the rest is covered by the informal economy, by the drag economy. So even if that 7 billion was here, even if it is still given to Taliban, it would not be used for expenditure.
Thank you very much on this question. And so, Michael, there was a
Yes.
question directly, and
Yes,
then
from
we'll
Eliza.
come to Russia.
Although I think Eliza actually she wanted to meet other people as well on exactly this issue. Also, I'll surprise you by being brief. I mean, yeah, yes, there is a long list of things that can be done, and I think so. Part of the fundamental change is saying that achieving peace in Afghanistan is not in the gift of the Taliban. They cannot and will not do it. That's we just have to get first of all establish that. I think absolutely the top of the list is this thing about space. Again, my colleagues and Mirwais, said please thank for a little bit of space. That the Taliban attaining a political office in Doha was fundamental to the course of the movement while it was waging its insurgency. Now, we're very unhappy with the outcome of that insurgency, but we should also respect the importance of what happened in Doha. And that was the first time in which the Taliban had an opportunity to move into the political domain from focusing primarily on their military campaign. I think that whether it is in one place or even in multiple places, for example, Geneva plus somewhere in the region plus somewhere halfway in between, that kind of formula, having secure places where Afghans can get together and work on the future of the country, and also can liaise with their counterparts on the ground in Afghanistan, and do so safely without having to worry about being either picked up by the security agency of the host country or be targeted by the Taliban. After establishing the principle, the Taliban aren't the ones who are going to do that. Or their Islamic Emirate is not the framework within which this is going to happen. The next one is the place. Then after that, then there are many other items. One example I would give that I'm going to give you the two bits. The stuff around facilitating the work of a legitimate resistance movement, resistance struggle, as in I'll think ANC. That is absolutely important. I do not think that given the Taliban's philosophy and approach, there is no way that they are going to leave power without facing some threat and use of force. Not, none of us here as fighters, we're not going to be firing guns, but we also, as analysts, we know that guns will be fired, and it's the Taliban's fault. But I would say that there's an obligation of people working in that resistance movement to find tactics which minimize the use of violence and the damage that it does. For example, we are in an era where actually there's some fascinating civic movements achieving wonderful things with either no or minimal use of force, finding ways that whether it be, can we say the Madagascar experience or the Nepal experience, the Bangladesh experience, how a generation of young Afghans can do this. That will be a wonderful thing to be involved in. So helping Afghans secure the opportunity to learn from these things, and also finding safe ways for Afghans who are on the ground to participate in the dialogue so that they can articulate their own concerns because they're so often misrepresented. There are ways that it can be done, but it's not going to be done in country, and it's not going to be done with permission from the Taliban because they won't allow it.
On Russia and India's recognition kind of things, will that elevate the Taliban stature internationally?
I think just look at the figures. If you look in terms of the 100 and what are we at? 86 countries as states haven't recognized them, and 2 have, and everybody knows that there are particular. It's not out of love or respect, or not even not even actually out of a desire to see the Taliban there. The Indians would rather have the Taliban gone, but while they're there, they're prepared to work with them a bit. The Russians don't trust the Taliban a minute, because I mean, the Russians consider Central Asia the near abroad. They know as well as anyone sitting on this panel that the biggest threat to the security of Central Asia is the Taliban regime. So I don't think anybody pays attention to the recognition.
Thank you very much to this side.
Briefly on both Russia recognition and the geopolitics that many believe is now shifting very rapidly, and also on the space and what could be done practically and ideally. I actually didn't want to go into the details, thinking that probably it will be very boring for you guys if you don't know the context of Afghanistan. But I can see that, you know, there are a lot of faces who know the context, nuts and bolts of what's happening in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan is a very diverse country. It's probably the most diverse country, probably one of the most diverse countries in the world, with 20 local languages being spoken, more than 29 ethnic linguistic groups, somehow tolerance and open to different jurisprudence of Islam. We have Sunni Shia and other Islamic jurisprudence. Until very recently, we had Jews, Christians living in Afghanistan. So it's a very diverse country, right? And achieving any kind of peace that is not only a political peace and signing an agreement, but a cohesive living together is not an easy job to do. But an ideal peace that we are working for, what is that ideal situation? We believe that there should be, first of all, a meaningful and genuine organic agreement among the political and civic groups of non-Taliban Afghans. And for that, yes, that space is very important. And it gives me pain when I talk about the space, because our country is taken away from us, and now we're talking about a little space so that we can sit and talk without the fear of being, as you said, facing some security threat by some intelligence or not being issued visa, etc. So it gives me a lot of pain, but that's our reality. That's our reality. Our reality is we don't have that space to sit and talk among ourselves, because we don't want that, kind of fabricated cohesiveness and agreement. We want an organic agreement among us, from all diversities of Afghanistan, to talk about what could be done post-Taliban and what is important, and agree on few principles from all different groups. We are in the beginning of that path. Involving regional countries make a big difference. Having the last dialogue organized by Women for Afghanistan, with participation of major platforms like the ones that you see here represented there, and some of them that are not here today, was a major milestone in terms of engaging the region. That is very, in Islamabad. That is important. It has to continue, but it shouldn't be ad hoc dialogue. There should be actual meaningful space, and Michael mentioned some of that. So that is from our side. Now, in that space, we want Afghans to talk organically. Once we agree, we want the international community to support us. Where will Taliban come into this? I believe somewhere Taliban will be included. And I believe those Taliban that will actually stand against the tyranny of what's happening now by the leader and by some group of fanatic who only believe that what they say is right. Otherwise, everybody who believes otherwise is entitled to be killed, right? So I believe they will have somewhere in this, the space to join these forces. So that's the long-term vision that we have. Now, how long that long-term will be is very unpredicted, because I remember last year around the same time, I was the key speaker in the Geneva Peace Week last year. And if you remember, Dr. Semple, we met with Dr. Hind, who is now the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs of Syria, the only woman. We met her at Interpeace. She was in the board of Interpeace, and she was an exiled. I don't know if we call ourselves exiled or diaspora. I call myself exiled. But she was a diaspora or exiled here 2 months later, I think, around 2 months later, in maybe late December, early January, she was back to her country, and I met her in February during the Munich Security Conference. She was to be appointed the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs. So things are very unpredictable in our conflict kind of affected situation, especially with the dynamics of the region. Going to the dynamics of the region, I believe Russia's recognition of Taliban, and I believe India opening up to the leader of a group, or one of the leaders of a group which is being sanctioned by the UN, several committees, including travel ban, to give him the space to go and talk to the Ugandese students is a real threat to India. Russia's recognition is actually opened opportunities for the global north, for us, because Afghanistan, unfortunately, is now entering a new phase of, groups that are there, Taliban, being used as a proxy by these regional players. So I think we are entering a new opportunity, new challenge in the region that we need to exploit and use and exhaust. The political opposition, the civic groups should do that if we really want to, want the region to sustain in terms of keeping democracy. But that's up to us and up to our international allies. Together we can do it. I'm not asking B-56, was it? The plane, B-52, planes to go and bombard Taliban from the US. This neither I expect nor I believe should happen, or any other force to use our soils to kill civilians. I'm not in favor of that. But in the meantime, I think, to give us the space so that we talk about what's happening and how we can fix it before it reaches your borders. Another 9/11 happens is important.
Thank you very much, Madam Koofi. I think the last part.
I just also, I have a few words on the Russia and India. I think the master of using extremism, Islamic extremism, as a foreign policy, as a tool, it was Pakistan, and it's failed. You see what's going on right now in Pakistan. You see they are facing the biggest threat, in their entire history. Even it's a question of sovereignty. It's a question of territorial integrity of Pakistan. So I don't think the Indian recognition will be an asset, even to India or to Taliban, because a couple of days back, they just tear apart a big sort of Islamic slogan in one of their provinces. How come they will tolerate an extremist group in Afghanistan, but have tightened their policies in a specific 200 million plus people in their soil? So I think that's not an asset, that's a liability, A. B, I don't think if a minister cabinet of India visit into the Deobandi madrasas will receive the same reception as Muttaqi received. So what that represents? Maybe that's also representing some sort of deep frustration. So if you give them some opportunity to show up, let's see what will happen on Indian. So I don't see that's to our friend Mr. Mansoor online. And the second thing is Russian, as Michael said, they understand the nature of Taliban. I think the recognition of Russian just come a week after the American, they recognized the Syria. So I think that's also, this is why it's too much geopolitics. But when it comes to the stabilization of, or to give a priority to the stabilization of Taliban sort of governance in Afghanistan, I think it will not serve no country benefit.
All right, I think if there is no other pressing question, we have a couple of minutes. Maybe I can just conclude, and it will be one of the events where you can, have some time to mingle and to talk and to exchange contacts. I see none. Okay, that's very good. So first of all, thank you very much. Thanks for the panel, and also our condolences to Dr. Amina Khan's family. She just informed us yesterday that her father-in-law suddenly passed away in Pakistan. She has to attend that, so she could not be with us here today. But we had a sufficiently strong panel, and we would have loved to have her here because she will talk about Pakistan perspective given what's happening in Afghanistan these days, both unfortunately in the sense of Pakistan for the first time in the history of our country, which is horrible, dreadful, taking a war basically directly into the capital after the TTP. But also, on the other hand, Pakistan is engaging in some sort of a regional diplomacy, trying to find a way, and of what Mr. Naub said, at least confessing to these years, decades of failed policy of emphasizing on some sort of, extremist, ethnic extremist groups being, a proxy in Afghanistan. And the backlash of that was, in the past, it was warned, but now they felt it, with the bones and with the skin. So I think if these two could give us, some hope in the crisis, and that will be the sort of regional diplomacy could start, and the use of this sort of, extremist group as a proxy, they have the biggest example in Pakistan. So I think with that, and also with this, what is happening, hopefully, around Gaza, I know that it's a very fragile peace over there too. But if we are moving towards some sort of settlement there, so somehow maybe President Trump will get some time to solve Afghanistan, Pakistan and Afghanistan's conflict. But to be honest, that because most of the attention, and of course, it deserves our attention, what happened in Gaza, the devastation and the genocide. So Afghanistan has always been, for good or for bad, the epicenter of many geopolitical competitions. It's never been dull, never been out of the media, but right now, the escalation between a nuclear state of Pakistan and a group which they know them very well. Because for the past 30 years, they know every streets, every house, every safe house, every non-safe house. So fighting with that kind of a group is like, you fight your own children, and they know all the cupboards and holes in the house. So I think, so that necessitates dialogues like this and thinking beyond this, thinking for the future of Afghanistan. And again, Geneva is the place of peace. Geneva has a role both in human rights, humanitarian, which is of course another area of focus on Afghanistan, but also on peace building. And you understand that some of the peace buildings have been shifted to Doha or some other places, which place is not important. But I think we need to bring back the peace building here agenda in Europe. And together with the regional countries, we have to work to, again, as I said, prevent Afghanistan into falling into another abyss of not only a civil war, but also a very fierce geopolitical competition, because it's in the crossroad of Belt and Roads and the crossroad of now India and Pakistan proxy war, and also Russia and the rest of the world. So I think our job is, we don't want to be permanently diasporas. We think as an exiles, we can help the country and go back, and one day we can invite you all at Kabul University. We'll be lecturers. Maybe the other younger generation can take the government. We don't want to do the mistakes which was done in the past, that the diasporas were pushed to govern a country. I don't believe a diaspora running the country, maybe for a transition period, but I think the people should do it themselves. And with this, I thank you very much, and you have a good afternoon, and thanks for all our panelists, and give them a round of applause.